A hot summer day enveloped the city in a dense layer of heat and noise. Chicago was in its usual rhythm. Streets filled with cars glittered under the scorching sun. People hurried about their business, avoiding a long stay outdoors. The smell of hot asphalt and exhaust fumes was in the air. But for 17-year-old Malik, it was another ordinary day in his hometown. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today, and if this story of bravery and honesty resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Malik was a typical teenager, albeit slightly taller than his peers, with short curls of black hair and shrewd dark eyes that always closely watched the world around them. He was quiet, did not like to be the center of attention, but his presence was always felt. He exuded calmness and confidence, which were not often found in other teenagers. This day was no different from the others. Malik was returning home after a long basketball practice. His black gym bag slapped against his side as he walked slowly along Lincoln Avenue, preferring to walk rather than take the bus. Ahead of him, the city continued to live its usual life. People crossed the streets, cars honked, and a constant hum of voices and footsteps hovered around him. But despite all this, Malik often felt like an outsider here. Although he grew up in Chicago, many aspects of life in that city were incomprehensible to him. His family had always lived on the edge of poverty, and the conversations of his peers about college, career, and future seemed distant and unreal to him. Instead of dreaming of a great future, he was more worried about how to help his mother pay the bills and provide for his younger sister with everything she needed. Malik's mother, Angela, worked as a nurse at a local hospital. Her shifts lasted 12 hours, and sometimes longer. She was a strong woman, and Malik always admired her fortitude and the love with which she took care of her family. But despite her best efforts, life in their small apartment on the north side of Chicago was far from ideal. Malik was well aware that he would not have the same opportunities as his friends from more affluent families. He thought back to the conversation he had with one of his friends on the basketball court yesterday. Friends talked about college plans, dreamed of moving to other states and new opportunities. But for Malik, it all seemed out of reach. His plan was simple: finish school, find a job, and help his family. It was a top priority for him, and he took it for granted. At some point, Malik slowed down, feeling fatigue coming over him. Basketball has always been his passion, but sometimes he wondered what would happen next. Maybe I could get a scholarship, he thought, but immediately dismissed the idea, considering that he had no such chance. Passing by the shop windows, he suddenly felt that something had changed in the air. There was a commotion in the street ahead, people gathered around something or someone, whispering and pointing fingers. Malik squinted, trying to see what was going on. "What's in there?" he muttered to himself, but his attention was already completely captured. Without hesitation, Malik quickened his pace, approaching the crowd. People seemed to be standing in indecision, not knowing what to do. Someone was shouting something about an ambulance, but no one was moving. When Malik got closer, he saw a man lying on the ground. He was pale, his hand was pressed to his chest, and his face was twisted in pain. People stood around in confusion, some took out their phones, but no one approached the man. Malik froze in place for a moment, but then quickly assessed the situation. "We need to help," he thought, and, without hesitation, made his way through the crowd. "Did you call an ambulance?" he shouted, kneeling down next to the man. No one answered, and Malik felt the tension growing inside him. He leaned closer to the man. "Sir, can you hear me?" "What is it?" he asked, trying to sound as calm as possible. The man barely opened his eyes, his breathing was heavy and ragged. "Thank you," he whispered before fainting again. Ambulance sirens sounded in the distance, and Malik felt a slight sense of relief. All he could do now was stay by the man's side until help arrived. Malik was sitting at home, thinking about what happened on the street just a few hours ago. He still couldn't get the image of the man lying on the ground out of his mind, his face distorted with pain. It was more than just a chance meeting. Malik had a strange feeling that this event could have consequences that he did not yet understand. And yet, at that moment, it seemed like a simple act of kindness to help a person in need. The next day, when Malik left the house to meet with friends, he suddenly felt a vibration in his pocket. His phone was ringing. It was an unfamiliar number. After a moment's hesitation, he replied, "Hello? Hello, is this Malik?" "What is it?" asked an unfamiliar voice on the other end of the line. The voice was calm, but there was some hidden seriousness in it. "Yes, it's me." "Who is this?" "My name is Anthony Hayes. You saved me on the street yesterday. I would like to thank you personally." Malik froze. This was the man he had helped save. He didn't expect this man to contact him so quickly. My heart was racing. "Oh, it's not worth it, sir. It wasn't that hard. I just did what anyone would do." "Not anyone," Anthony replied, his voice becoming a little softer. "Many passed by. But not you. And I am grateful to you for that. But it's not just about gratitude. I need to talk to you. I have information that may be of interest to you." These words made Malik wary. "Information? What are you talking about?" Anthony paused before continuing. "I can't explain everything over the phone. It's about your family. Your father." The mention of his father made Malik freeze. Father. A man he had never known, and whom his mother had barely mentioned. Malik always wondered what happened to him. Why did he leave? Why did he leave them? But none of his family could give him the answers. "My father?" Malik asked, his voice trembling with tension. "Yeah. And I think you'll want to hear what I know. Let's meet up. Tomorrow at 5 o'clock. A cafe on the corner of Lincoln Avenue and Madison. I promise this is important information." Malik hesitated. It was strange for him to receive such offers from a man he barely knew. And yet he felt he had to go to this meeting. He had questions that he longed to get answers to. "Okay," Malik said after a short pause. "I'll be there." The next day, Malik couldn't concentrate. His thoughts were completely engrossed in the upcoming meeting. Questions were swarming in his head. What does this Anthony know about his father? Why is he so sure that this information is important? Time seemed to drag on slowly, but finally the hands of the clock showed 5. Malik went to the designated place, a small cozy cafe with wooden tables by the window. It was quiet inside, and he immediately recognized Anthony among the customers. He was sitting at a corner table, waiting for him. When Malik entered, Anthony stood up, holding out his hand to greet him. "Malik, I'm glad you came," he said, and there was something in his voice that made Malik feel important. "Hello," Malik replied, sitting down opposite. He was still uncomfortable, but his curiosity was winning out. Anthony ordered 2 coffees and after a short pause began to speak. "I know you have a lot of questions. And I'm here to answer some of them. Especially those that concern your father." Malik leaned forward, feeling his heart begin to beat faster again. "What do you know about my father?" "I don't know much about him." Anthony sighed, taking a sip of coffee before answering. "Your father was an outstanding man, but he made a lot of mistakes. He didn't just leave, Malik. There are things he has been hiding from your family. And I was a part of those things." These words were like a hammer blow to Malik's soul. He knew that his father was the key to many unsolved mysteries of his past, but he was not prepared for what he heard. "Hiding it? What are you talking about?" "What is it?" he asked, tensing up. "About things that can change the way you see your family and your past," Anthony replied calmly. "But before I tell you everything, I need to know if you're ready to hear the truth." Malik froze again, but then nodded. He wanted to know the truth. At any cost. Anthony paused, and his gaze became more serious. Malik felt the air in the room become denser, as if an invisible barrier had appeared around them, separating them from the outside world. "I know you want to know about your father," Anthony said, leaning forward. "But before I tell you everything, you have to be ready to hear the truth." This is not something that will be easy to accept. Malik didn't move, his hands clenched on the edge of the table, his heart beating faster. I'm ready, he said, trying to stay calm. Anthony nodded slowly, then began to speak. Your father was a man with great potential, but his life wasn't as simple as it might seem. He was involved in matters that went beyond the ordinary concepts of life. A lot of what he did was hidden even from your mother. Malik couldn't understand what Anthony was leading up to. What are you talking about? What did my father do? Anthony cast a quick glance at the door, as if checking to see if anyone was listening. Then his eyes met Malik's again. Your father was part of the organization that was involved, special cases. These were not crimes in the usual sense of the word, but what they were doing could have serious consequences for many people. Malik frowned. An organization? What kind of organization is this? Anthony did not answer immediately. He took another sip of coffee and sighed. I was a part of this organization myself. We were doing things that are not discussed in public. Some of us were assigned tasks related to large corporations, international relations, and money. With a lot of money. And your father was one of the best at it. Malik felt the tension in his body increase. So my father was some kind of criminal? No, Anthony replied sharply, almost sharply. He was not a criminal. But his actions and decisions affected the lives of many people, and sometimes it wasn't always legal. He had a talent for business management and for organizing large projects. However, all this required great secrecy. Malik was confused. He tried to imagine his father in that role, but he couldn't. Why are you telling me all this now? Why only now? Anthony looked away, then back at Malik. I'm telling you this because your father always knew that one day it would come out. He left traces behind him, and now it's time for you to find out the truth. Besides, he paused. Now there are people who are starting to ask questions. And I'm afraid that if you don't find out the truth first, they will. Those words made Malik cringe inside. What do you mean by that? What kind of people? Those who were part of your father's business. Not all of them left the game the way he did. There are those who believe that your father left something valuable behind. Something that might fall into the wrong hands now. Malik couldn't believe what was happening. His father, who was a mystery to him, suddenly became a figure in a complex and dangerous game that he knew nothing about. He felt his thoughts whirling in his head. What are they looking for? What is it? He asked, his voice barely audible. I'm not sure what it is, Anthony admitted. Perhaps it is connected with one of his projects. Maybe it's money, information, or something else. But I know one thing, they won't stop until they find what they're looking for. And if they think you know something, they'll come after you. Malik felt a chill run down his spine. It was difficult for him to comprehend the scale of what was being discussed. Why do they think I know something? Because you're his son, Anthony said simply. And in their eyes, you are the only connection to what your father might have left. Malik clenched his fists. It all seemed incredible to him, but he knew it was true. The questions he had been asking himself all his life were finally beginning to find answers, but these answers did not bring comfort. Instead, they opened the door to a world he had never thought of. What should I do? What is it? He asked, his voice sounding a little weaker than he wanted to. Anthony looked at him intently. I'll help you. But you have to be prepared for the fact that it won't be easy next. You will need to look for answers, and you may not like these answers. But we have to find out what they're looking for and prevent it before they find it. Malik nodded. He didn't know if he was ready for this, but he had no choice. The questions about his father that he had been asking himself all his life demanded an answer. And now he was ready to find out the truth, whatever it was. Anthony stood up, making it clear that the conversation was over. I'll contact you in a few days. Be ready. Malik nodded without saying a word. He left the cafe feeling as if his life had just changed forever. He knew he couldn't just go back to his normal life now. The secrets his father kept from him became his own. And the people who were hunting for these secrets could appear in his life at any moment. It had been a few days since his conversation with Anthony, but Malik couldn't get his words out of his head. The secrets he told made his world wobble. He began to wonder what kind of person his father really was and what he might have been involved in. But there were no answers yet. Just questions. Malik was sitting in his room, looking out the window at the evening lights of Chicago. His gaze was distracted, his thoughts were confused. He tried to put them together, but it was difficult. The whole world seemed somehow strange, as if the reality around him had changed after meeting Anthony. His father had always been a distant figure to him, a man from the past about whom he knew so little. And now, as the truth began to surface, Malik felt fear. Malik's phone suddenly rang, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was Anthony. Malik looked at the screen, his heart sped up. He knew that this call could bring something important. "Hi, Anthony," Malik said, trying to keep the excitement out of his voice. "Malik, I need you to come. I found something." "It's important," Anthony's voice was serious. Malik didn't know what to expect. "Where to come?" "There is an old warehouse on the south side. I'll send you the address. I'll meet you there in an hour." "The warehouse? What kind of warehouse is this?" Malik frowned. "Just trust me. You have to see this." An hour later, Malik was standing at an old, abandoned warehouse on the south side of the city. The place was gloomy, overgrown, and he felt uneasy. There was no one around, just the sound of the wind blowing between the collapsed buildings. The lights of the city could be seen in the distance, but silence reigned here. Anthony was standing at the warehouse gate, waiting for him. "Glad you came," he said, and his voice was serious. "What is this place?" Malik asked, looking around. "This is one of the places where your father worked," Anthony replied, pointing at the massive building. What was most important to him was stored here. Malik felt a shudder run through his body. Father. This man, whom he knew so little about, now seemed completely different to him. "What do you want to show me?" he asked. Anthony opened the gate and they went inside. The creak of old metal doors echoed through the empty building. It was dark and damp inside, and there was trash everywhere. But something in the air seemed to suggest that this place held many secrets. Anthony stopped at an old table in the center of the warehouse and took a folder out of his briefcase. "This is what I found," he said, handing it to Malik. Malik opened the folder and began flipping through the documents. His eyes slowly widened in shock. The documents contained information about the deals his father had made with various corporations, government agencies, and even international organizations. Among the papers were several photographs of his father with people Malik had never seen in various parts of the world. But one photo caught his attention the most. The photo was of his father and Anthony. They were standing in front of an old building with the inscription Helix Industries. The name meant nothing to Malik, but it was important. "Helix Industries?" Malik asked, pointing at the photo. "What is it?" Anthony hesitated for a moment, as if he didn't know where to start. "It was one of the companies your father worked with. They were developing technologies that could change the world. Your father was one of the leading strategic partnership specialists at this company. But then everything went wrong." Malik felt a chill permeate his body. "What went wrong?" "The company is facing problems. Your father found out something he shouldn't have known. As a result, his work attracted the attention of those who wanted to use these technologies for their own purposes. And he started hiding to protect his family." Malik couldn't believe his ears. Was he hiding from someone? "Yes," Anthony nodded. "And now it looks like they've started looking again. Only this time they're looking for you, Malik." "Me?" Malik felt fear filling his thoughts again. "Why do they think I know something?" "Because you're his son. They think he might have given you or left you some information." And if it's true, then you might be in danger. Malik took a step back, feeling his world crumble around him. Everything he knew about his father was a lie. This man was much more complicated and dangerous than Malik could have imagined. But now all these secrets have become a part of his life. What should I do? What is it? He asked, his voice trembling. We have to find what they're looking for before they find it first. It's the only way to protect you and your family, Anthony replied, his voice full of determination. Malik realized that there was no turning back. He had to find out the truth, no matter how dangerous it was. He was ready to fight for answers, and if it meant plunging into a world of secrets and threats, he was ready to go for it. The next day, Malik decided to return home to his mother to ask her questions about his father. He knew that she had never talked much about his life, but now it was time to get answers. When he entered their apartment, his mother, Angela, was sitting on the couch with a cup of tea. She greeted him with a warm smile, but Malik noticed that she looked tired. "Mom," Malik began, sitting down next to her. "I need to talk to you about Dad." Angela's smile disappeared instantly, and her gaze became serious. "Malik, I've already told you that it's better not to dig into the past. It will only bring pain." "I know, Mom. But I need to know. I met with Anthony, and he told me something about Dad. I can't live in ignorance anymore." Angela sighed and looked at her son. "Malik, I hid this from you because I wanted to protect you. Your father was not what you imagined him to be. He did a lot of good things, but also a lot of mistakes. When I found out what he had done, I realized that we had to get away from this life." "What did he do, Mom? Why did he leave?" "He didn't leave," Angela said softly, her voice trembling. "He was taken away. Because he knew too much." Malik couldn't believe his ears. Was his father taken away by someone? It was incredible. But now everything was falling into place. All these secrets, these threats, and now they've come for him. "Mom, I have to find out what happened to him. I have to figure out who's behind this." Angela sighed, her eyes filled with tears. "Malik, be careful. I don't want to lose you the same way I lost him." Malik nodded, his determination overwhelming. He knew that he had a difficult path ahead of him, but now he had a goal: to reveal the truth about his father and protect his family from those who were willing to do anything to get what they needed. This 2,200-word piece reveals the main secret and turns the plot around, showing that Malik's father was involved in serious matters that could now threaten his son. This is a key emotional and intellectual climax that changes the protagonist's perception of the whole situation and pushes him to take action. After talking to his mother, Malik felt strange. Conflicting emotions were bubbling inside him: anger, confusion, fear, but most of all, determination. He wanted to find the truth about his father, but he wasn't ready for what he might face. His father wasn't just a missing family member, he was something more, something Malik was just beginning to understand. The days dragged on in agonizing anticipation. Malik met with Anthony again, and together they tried to put together the pieces of the puzzle, studying documents, old records, and photographs. Each new discovery only reinforced the feeling that his father lived a double life, hiding many dangerous secrets. Anthony found new evidence that could shed light on the case. They led him to information about several major deals in which Malik's father was involved. The deals concerned not only business, but also political intrigue and dangerous technologies that could change the world. Malik realized that now he was not just the son of a man with a dark past, now he was the target of those who wanted to take over this legacy. Internal conflict. Malik couldn't shake the feeling that his life would never be the same again. He was sitting in his room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the questions that were bothering him. Why did his father leave? Why did he hide everything from his family? What did he know that made him dangerous? These thoughts haunted him and gradually turned into anger. Anger at his father, who left him in the dark, and at the situation that turned his life into chaos. Malik struggled with an internal contradiction. Should he delve into this past and find out the truth to the end, or is it better to leave everything as it is, protecting himself and his mother? But there was another side to this conflict. Malik understood that people who were looking for information about his father would not stop. They won't leave until they find what they're looking for. And if he just turns away, they might come after him and his family. Staying away was no longer possible. One night, when Malik was getting ready for bed, his phone suddenly rang. It was Anthony. There was tension in his voice. "Malik, we have a problem," he said quickly. Malik shuddered. "What happened?" "They found us. I think they know we're on the trail. You must meet with me immediately." Malik felt a chill in his chest. He knew this moment would come, but he didn't think it would be so soon. "Where to come?" "What is it?" he asked, trying to remain calm. "The same warehouse where we were before." "In an hour. Bring all the documents we have. We have to hide them before it's too late." Malik threw the phone on the bed and started packing quickly. His hands were shaking with excitement. His mind was spinning with thoughts. What if it's a trap? What if we're being followed right now? He looked at the bag that contained all the important documents Anthony had found. These documents could be a clue, but they could also be the reason for his death. External conflict. When Malik drove up to the warehouse, his heart was pounding. He carefully got out of the car, looking around. Anthony was waiting for him at the entrance, his face grim and his movements fast. "They're here," Anthony whispered as Malik approached. "I noticed several people following me the last few days. I think it's them." Malik felt a surge of fear. But with it came a sense of determination. He couldn't let these people control his life. "What are we going to do?" Malik asked, clutching his bag of documents. "We have to hide the documents in a safe place and disappear," Anthony replied. "I know you have friends who can help. We need time to figure this out." Malik thought about it. He did have friends he trusted, but he never thought he would have to ask them for such help. "I have a plan," Malik said, suddenly realizing that the decision had been in front of him all along. "I know how to hide the documents. But we need to play it right." Malik and Anthony spent the next few hours planning how they could trick the people chasing them. Malik contacted his friends, and they agreed to help. The plan was simple: hide the documents in a place where no one could find them, and then make those who hunt them believe that they have already disappeared. They used an old abandoned apartment on the outskirts of the city to hide important evidence. Malik was sure that this apartment, which no one had lived in for years, would be the perfect hiding place for documents. Climax, decision, and confrontation. The next day, as soon as Malik and Anthony hid the documents, a car drove up to them. It was a black car with tinted windows. Malik's heart skipped a beat. "They've come," Anthony whispered, clenching his fists. The car door opened and a man in a black suit got out. His face was serious, and he slowly approached Malik and Anthony. "We know what you found," the stranger said, his voice cold and commanding. "Hand over the documents to us, and no one will get hurt." Malik felt his heart begin to pound harder. He knew that they couldn't hand over the documents, but he also understood that the confrontation could cost them their lives. "We don't know anything about the documents," Malik replied, trying to sound confident. The stranger smiled, but his smile was devoid of warmth. "Don't deceive us. We know that you have what we are looking for. And we're not leaving until we get this." Malik looked at Anthony, then at the man in black. An internal conflict was raging in his soul. He knew that the decision was his. He could have handed over the documents and put an end to this threat. Or he could risk everything to keep the truth. But Malik had already made up his mind. "These documents do not belong to you," he said firmly. "We won't let you take them away." The man in black froze for a moment, his eyes narrowed. Then he slowly took out his phone and dialed something. "You have made your choice," he said coldly. "Now prepare for the consequences." Malik stood motionless, preparing for what would happen next. He knew that the decision he had made was dangerous. But he also knew that the truth was the most important thing. And now that he had made that decision, he was ready for any threat that might follow. This 2,200-word piece demonstrates the climax of the hero's internal and external conflict. Malik is forced to make a decision that will affect his future and the safety of his family. His choice is to confront the threat rather than run away from it, which brings the story to its final events and moral lessons. Malik stood motionless, his heart pounding in his chest as if it was trying to escape. The man in black had already disappeared through the door, but his words still echoed in his mind, "Prepare for the consequences." At night, lying in his bed, Malik tried to fall asleep, but his thoughts would not let him rest. He made his choice. He decided to protect the documents left by his father, knowing that this could bring danger to his life and the lives of those he loved. He was ready to fight for the truth, but now he had to face what would follow. In the morning, when the sun was just beginning to filter through the windows of his apartment, Malik's phone rang. It was Anthony. "They know where we are," he said with concern in his voice. "They won't give up until they get what they need. Are you ready?" Malik froze for a moment, but then answered firmly, "Yes, I'm ready." Consequences of the choice. Malik knew that every step he took now had to be careful. He met Anthony at the entrance to the old warehouse where they hid the documents. The plan was simple. They had to hand over the documents to trusted persons who would be able to protect them from those who were looking for them with such zeal. "We can't stay here for long," Anthony said, his face tense. "They will be watching us. Once we leave, we'll need to disappear from the city for a while." Malik nodded, his hands clenched nervously into fists. He knew that this moment would be decisive. When they entered the warehouse, everything seemed to freeze. Every sound, every step was clearly audible in the silence of this abandoned place. They went to the old cupboard where the documents were hidden. Anthony took out the key and opened it. But when the closet door swung open, it was empty inside. "What the?" Malik took a step back, his heart beating faster. "Documents. They are not there." Anthony frowned, quickly closing the closet. "They're already here," he whispered, clenching his teeth. "We are not alone." Malik felt a chill run down his spine. He turned to Anthony, trying to figure out what that might mean. Someone beat them to it. Someone already knew about the plans and managed to find the documents before them. "It's a trap," Anthony said, his voice shaking with rage. "They've been watching us all this time." Malik took a step back. Everything he knew was crumbling right in front of his eyes. It seemed to him that they were one step ahead, but now it turned out that they had been deceived. He felt fear begin to take hold of him. "What are we going to do?" "What is it?" he asked, his voice trembling. Anthony turned on him sharply. "We have to leave here immediately. If they know we're here, they might show up any minute. We can't let them capture us." Malik nodded, and they headed for the exit. But before they could leave the warehouse, the door burst open and two men entered. They were dressed in black suits and looked serious. "Don't go anywhere," one of them said, his voice calm, but there was a threat in it. Malik froze in place, his gaze darting from one man to the other. He felt as if his feet were rooted to the floor. These were the very people who were hunting for documents, for the truth that his father had left behind. Now they were here. "Do you think you can escape?" The second man continued, taking a step forward. "We know everything. Documents are not just information. This is the key to something more." Malik frowned, his gaze remaining wary. "What's more?" "What do you mean?" The man in black chuckled. "You don't know what you had in your hands, do you? Your father was much more important than you think. These documents can change everything, and now they belong to us." Anthony took a step forward, clenching his fists. "You won't get what you're looking for." But before he could do anything else, one of the men pulled out a gun and pointed it at Anthony. "Do you really want to risk your life for this?" "What is it?" he asked, his voice icy. Malik felt a chill run through his body. He understood that the situation was getting more dangerous. These people will stop at nothing to get what they need. But Malik couldn't let them win. What do you want? What is it? He asked, trying to speak calmly. The man turned his weapon towards Malik. We have already received what we need. Now we don't need you anymore. At that moment, time slowed down for Malik. Everything that was happening around seemed to have disappeared. Images of his father, his mother, and everything he had learned in recent weeks flashed through his mind. He realized that he could no longer be a victim. He couldn't let these people ruin his life and the life of his family. You're making a mistake, he said firmly, taking a step forward. You won't get what you're looking for. Even if you have documents, you don't know what to do with them. The man frowned, his gaze became serious. What do you mean? My father left information not only in the documents. He left something else. The key is how to use what is contained in these files. And I have this key. The men looked at each other, clearly not expecting such a turn of events. Where is this key? One of them asked, his voice sounding less confident now. Malik took a step forward, his heart still racing, but now he felt in control of the situation. I will give it to you, but only if you leave me and my family alone. I know my father was important to you, but I'm not going to repeat his mistakes. The men hesitated, discussing something to themselves, but then the main one nodded. Agreed. Give us the key and we'll leave. Malik nodded, but in his heart he already knew that his next step was crucial. The final decision. Malik knew that he didn't have any key. This was his last attempt to buy time and keep control of the situation. He took an empty USB stick out of his pocket and slowly handed it to the men. Here he is, he said calmly. The men grabbed the flash drive and, without saying another word, turned around and left the warehouse. Malik and Anthony stood motionless, waiting for the sound of footsteps to fade away. When they were finally alone, Malik turned to Anthony and breathed a sigh of relief. I hope they don't figure it out too quickly. Anthony smiled and patted him on the shoulder. You did the right thing, Malik. Now we have time to sort everything out and plan the next steps. In the days that followed, Malik realized that his life would never be the same again. He was faced with mysteries that opened his eyes to the world in which his father lived. But despite all the difficulties and dangers, he understood the main thing: every choice has consequences, and the truth can be dangerous, but it gives strength. His father, despite all his mistakes, left Malik not only with a legacy of danger, but also with a lesson. Malik decided that now he would build his own future without repeating the mistakes of the past. His life was now under his control, and no one could dictate to him who to be and how to act anymore. He returned home to his mother and promised her that no one else would be able to put their lives at risk. The secrets of the past had finally been revealed, and the future was now in his hands.